Welcome, everyone. So thank you for joining us this afternoon for this webinar focused on accelerating data and AI strategy for universities. We have 25 universities registered today, so we appreciate your time. We'll kick off with some housekeeping. So the event will be recorded and sent to you alongside our slides from today. We've saved 10 minutes at the end for questions and answers, so please do post your questions in the chat and we'll be sure to answer them for you. Please do keep yourselves on mute as well throughout, and obviously feel free to either unmute yourself at the end or we'll be reviewing the chat to make sure that we can answer any questions. And we will be posting polls throughout each section as well to keep an eye out for those, because we'd love to hear your responses. So hi everyone, I'm Josh, effectively Transparity's industry lead for higher education, and I'll be hosting our webinar today. Generally thrilled with such a brilliant group of speakers today, which bring obviously a wealth of experience when it comes to data and AI and the higher education industry. So first up, we have Cornelia. Cornelia's Microsoft's worldwide industry advisor for public sector, and she'll be sharing Microsoft's perspective on innovation in the industry. Super thrilled to have John from the University of Surrey today. John is CIO and has led 2 digital transformations previously at 2 other universities, as long as the rest of his career as well. So he'll be offering reflections on his first year at Surrey and outlining his vision for the future. We've also got Alistair, our CTO at Transparity. So Alistair was previously founder of a data consultancy that was later acquired by Transparity. So he's been around the block when it comes to data and AI, and will be walking us through our kind of strategic approach in this space. Ian is our principal GRC architect, so he'll be explaining how we ensure governance and security embedded from the very beginning of these projects. And we have prepared these slides and content for you to take away. Our goal is really to keep this session a bit more conversational. So imagine this is more of like a virtual panel discussion, so you can hear a range of perspectives as we walk through. And all of these speakers here today will be available for the questions at the end. So you might be wondering who Transparity are. So before we start, the context I'd like to set really is that Microsoft are responsible for building the technology that we all know and love, but they do need partners like Transparity to help universities implement, adopt, and manage it. Microsoft grade their partners via accreditations. So Transparity are the most accredited partner in the UK. And all that means for you is that we've been verified as a safe pair of hands via Microsoft, but also we have access to any Microsoft funding that's available for projects, of which we obtained $2 million in funding throughout FY25 alone. And we work across the entire Microsoft stack, so we're 100% focused on Microsoft. As well as that, we're actually part of Microsoft's Data and AI Partner Advisory Council. So Alistair and the team are in the States on a regular basis, kind of understanding and feeding into the latest and greatest products from Microsoft. And when it comes to AI, we feel that really this shouldn't be delivered as like an isolated practice or an isolated solution. It comes from various areas, so cybersecurity to applications to data to change and adoption. So we bring that depth of capability. Happy to answer any other questions on Transparity at the end, but that's enough about us. I will be handing over to Cornelia to talk us through how Microsoft is seeing data and AI transformation within the industry.
Yes, thank you so much, Josh. It's a pleasure to be here today. Let me see if I can control the slides, and it seems to look good. Yes.
You got it.
Great. So yeah, from a Microsoft perspective, I'm looking at it for the time zone. So in the whole of EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, we see some very common trends, and especially with focus on Europe and the UK, of course, as part of it. We see that the demands from student sides are increasing considerably. So students are coming to the university with the expectation of an AI consumer evermore, and that makes it super challenging to keep up with the speed and to respond to that in some way for the higher education institutions. And along with that, they are increasingly under pressure when it comes to budgets, to cyber threats, and all the innovation that is happening. They are supposed to be oftentimes the strongholds of innovation and the first adopters. And this is something that is super challenging for most of the higher education institutions across the board. So we are facing this together with them and trying as much as we can to help them through this. Through efficiency gains of several kinds and through making study paths and student journeys more engaging and more interactive to also keep students connected to the campus. So this is something that is happening all over the place. And then at the same time, we see a huge adoption rate, especially in higher education. So compared to other industries, that's extremely high, 95%. We don't have that in enterprise, not at all. So we are far from it. And this is something that results into a huge ROI. So if universities invest $1 in AI, they get a huge reward for it in the end. So usually that pays off largely. And this is something that we also discuss with many institutions when it comes to strategizing and planning AI projects. And also the environment, the ecosystem that is then absorbing kind of the graduates in the end is asking for AI capabilities and literacy, of course, increasingly so, even though still less than we see in the adoption rate of the students. So actually the students are driving this development very strongly. We have some very common use cases across the board. So many universities are trying to increase the engagement of students and to increase the learning path and have some 24/7 agents available that help students to be really connected to the courses and the topics. And this works really well across the board. So when it comes to tutoring tools, we have various nice examples and good practice already in place that makes it available as a template also for other institutions. So if you're interested in that, feel free to contact us. Same goes for student well-being. That's also a key element. There are many agents that unite the two. So they are doing the tutoring and also taking care of the students' well-being. That depends very much on the back end, on the data that you feed into this. It can be a holistic agent for all the students or even comprising staff and then role-based according to the needs of each individual. This can be structured in different ways. And we see that in many, many institutions, as you can see. What is common to them is that everybody is discussing data governance and data management anew. So we see a lot of consolidation, data hygiene projects going on, while they are already experimenting with the first agent project. So this is something that runs usually in parallel. So it shouldn't keep you from integrating AI solutions into your portfolio if you don't feel confident yet around the data governance. It's something that goes hand in hand, usually. Okay, the cybersecurity threats are a different topic. That's something super prominent for many institutions because with AI comes a lot of shadow IT usually because students bring it into the organization using all kinds of tools and a bunch of private tools usually. And that sometimes leads to cybersecurity problems. So the earlier you adopt AI as your own project and take ownership of the whole complex that is connected to it, the better it is also for your cybersecurity in your organization. That's usually what we see. In academia, we also have researchers making use of AI ever since, but now it's increasingly so. We have several systems where it's actually facilitating the research process as a whole, so you can quickly retrieve material platform for your research. You can easily access materials from various data sources. This is something that we see in many institutions right now. Also on the basis of Copilot, by the way, which might be a bit surprising because it's a standard tool that Microsoft is offering off the shelf, but it can, if wisely connected to the right data sources, it can well be used also in research. So happy to provide more info on that later on. And yeah, there you can see those are the main drivers of higher education business, if you see it from a business perspective. At the moment, we are reinventing the campus engagement of students, and we enrich their experiences. We reshape the processes, and we bend the curve on innovation all at the same time, which is tricky, but it can be done in several single projects and then recombined in the end if you really have a very good data management in place there. We do that on the basis of our 3 core solutions, as you can see there. So they are being consolidated. Our solutions are ever more consolidated on those 3 focus areas. You might remember Microsoft has a super broad portfolio, and you might remember the complexity of it. This is all being driven by AI now. So the interaction with our platforms is mainly happening through agents, also in universities and in enterprises, increasingly so. That's what makes it also easier for us to, provide simpler user interfaces and simpler consolidated approaches to various challenges of the business. This is what we are offering. This is the whole of the portfolio. There it becomes complex again. But actually, it's all focusing on the 3 areas that we just saw before. So this is just to give you an idea of what's available for free. For example, the top layer, you have possibilities to use Copilot and GitHub, for example, for free as a university. Happy to, give you the info to get started and try and just, use it for the first proofs of concept. And then, of course, a very strong element of our strategy in higher education at the moment is, of course, Copilot and the use of it. So we are expecting some new offerings around that. We are blending specific solutions for teaching and learning into Copilot. We are lowering the price for academic institutions. That's something that we're super driving at the moment, so key element of our strategy. And then, of course, all the development of your own agents on a low-code basis is happening in Copilot Studio that is attached to it. Some of that is still available also for free. So feel free to get informed. I will also share the links so you can get onboarded on that. And of course, there are millions. This is actually already overtaken by far 1,700 models in the Azure AI Foundry. This is already exceeded by far. We have by now 11,000 even. So it's a huge number, and you can take these models and develop your own AI solutions for your institutions if you have the interest and the capabilities to do so. Otherwise, we use the off-the-shelf solutions that Microsoft offers, such as Copilot. And on the basis of Fabric, and this is something that we probably discuss more in detail in the further course of the webinar, you can definitely develop, integrate your data sources that are coming from all over the place in a simpler way and make sure this is being managed in a professional way, and you can access all the different data sources that might be relevant to your research or studies. Microsoft is doing all this on enterprise security level, and we're trying to offer the most trustworthy AI, and that's the final one. So we are very much sticking to safety and security and privacy when it comes to AI, because that's kind of what our unique selling point in that is also. We're trying to be the first front runners, of course, when it comes to technology, but at the same time to provide it in a safe and secure way to make sure you don't have to worry about data breaches. You are all handling intellectual property, and that's extremely important to all of you. And it's confident and sensitive data, so absolutely clear that needs to be protected, and we are offering the highest of industry standards also to universities, of course. This has been a quick run through our strategy, and I'm handing it over now to John, I guess, or back to Josh.
No, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Cornelia. We'll let you take a breath until shortly, and appreciate the insight there. If anyone does have any questions for Cornelia or Microsoft, please do pop them in the chat. So, John, I think does that resonate with you at Surrey? And did you want to give us a bit of an overview of your last year at Surrey and what your plans moving forward?
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and hello everyone, and thank you again, Josh, for asking me to come along and speak today. Although also feel slightly intimidated talking in front of my peers, because I'm sure there's people out there with far greater knowledge and experience than me. But what I do have is some scars of some things we've tried and some lessons learned, and very happy to try and share those today. In terms of what resonate, absolutely. I mean, I think we're all seeing an ever increasing expectation from students around the digital experience, and especially around use of AI now. I mean, it's almost becoming normal for them, really, in terms of generative AI, etc. Also, I expect colleagues also feel that the rate of change just seems to be ever increasing, and I think AI is a perfect example of that. Also in our sector, far more scrutiny now over the finances. You know, every pound we spend now, we have to think very carefully about it. And certainly cyber, I've got the scars there from my time in Portsmouth. So I'm very focused on the need to protect our environments through appropriate cyber controls. And I think AI has certainly raised that to another level again, really, with potential data leakage through the sort of free internet tools that people are using. So lots there that really resonate, I think. And as well as sort of trying to fix all those things, we also have the legacy infrastructures and systems that we need to fix, as well as the data challenge I'm sure we'll come back to. In terms of my last year, I joined Surrey in July 24. That was after 4 years at Portsmouth and 7 years at Bournemouth University. I had 15 years in the NHS and then 6 years at University West of England in Bristol, and started my career at British Aerospace Defence. But my first year has been trying to get out and about quite a bit, really, within the university and find out what the issues are, talking to as many people as I can, and certainly running a number of workshops with my teams, which have been very helpful in identifying where we are. And the picture here on the right is an AI generated view of a description I gave to the AI chatbot on where I thought Surrey's digital journey was. And actually, the first iteration of this, it wasn't raining and there was no water on the stick legs, really, but it was really trying to emphasize that we've done quite a bit of shiny stuff over the last few years, as I can understand, but maybe we've started to neglect the underlying foundations, our data, some of our infrastructure, and more of the investments being directed to maybe new systems and new facilities. And that's all starting to creak a little bit. And this iteration of the picture really is AI's then come along and really sort of flooded the basement, and there's quite a lot of rain. So it feels like we were under a lot of pressure to try and respond in this situation. So where I've got to really is starting to look at developing this new digital plan, which I've now got through our executive board, and really try to adjust the focus back into, we do need to get our foundations right before and as well as trying to invest in the more interesting parts of our digital environment. So some of the things there, looking at our foundations, which is aging, we've lacked investment a little bit over the last few years, so trying to adjust that. And obviously that lack of investment has impacted on reliability in places. Also looked at our systems, and we have quite a lot of siloed systems and data in those silos. So we can't really get the full benefit of our data at the moment. Some inconsistent user interfaces, but data quality again is also an issue, and something I'd like to look at. And some of these things I had implemented previously in my previous 2 universities. So none of these things were particularly a surprise. And I think it's just about trying to make the case really to take these things forward. Certainly 3 areas I really wanted to try and impact in the plan was around the user experience, the efficiency of the organisation, and to make it 3 E's, I basically called the last one enlightenment, but really that's all around unlocking the potential of our data, make it more accessible, more trusted, and ideally making it AI ready, which it's not at the moment. So the ongoing priorities for me short term, investing in our people, and I categorise everyone at the university really. I think there's more we need to do here at Surrey to invest in our staff and students, digital, data, AI literacy. Want to really try and do something around our data maturity, get that into a better place. We don't have a warehouse or a lake at the moment, so really start to look at developing that lake house, really starting that AI journey, and certainly very keen to look at a digital workspace to give a more unified experience to our staff and students. So that's really where we are at the moment. So it's very early days. It's the first year, but we're really starting now to try and pull these programs together, whilst also trying to work on our data maturity program, and certainly starting to respond to the demand around AI.
Certainly keeping yourself busy, John. Fair play. So I'm sure like many on the call as well. And yeah, if anyone's got any additional questions for John as well, please feel free to post them in the chat. So thank you, John. We'll come back to you kind of shortly with your thoughts throughout. Alistair, if you'd like to take control and kind of give us a bit of a view on how transparency is supporting universities and data and AI.
Yeah, sure. Happy to pick up there, Josh. It's interesting you talking about that as well, John, because it reflects back some of what we've obviously worked through with you in some of the early stage engagement. I'm intrigued to understand what might be under the waterline on your photo as well, because you can see the nice new shiny building in the stilts, but I've got these pictures of piranhas chewing away at the posts, and then what the post sunk into in the ground, some boggy substrate that's probably not that firm. So the layers of these things, when you start to peel them back, are quite interesting when you actually get into it. What we thought we'd do is just split slightly the data and AI strategic view of the world, because we talked about data strategy for a long time, and the advent of AI and its close alignment to data has pulled those two things very close together, and sometimes they get talked about as the same thing when good discipline, and I think you touched on it, Cornelia, when you mentioned maturity and hygiene in data being a key factor to doing the right things within AI is really important. And when we think about data strategy, we often start a conversation, as we do with all technology, about maturity model. So we'll talk about cloud maturity model generally for your digital footprint, but we can then narrow down to data maturity. And when we put this slide up in early stage engagements with organizations and customers that we work with, and we'll often ask that question, where are you on this maturity model? A lot of organizations today would say we're somewhere between 1 and 2. Occasionally you'll get somebody, punching for the far right hand side, but generally there's acceptance that people have got work to do. And when you start to unpick this, you might well find that organizations, maybe they are achieving some of these sort of more advanced levels of capabilities, but it's normally within pockets of their organization, not normally holistically across the whole business. And in reality, when you start to peel back the layers and unpick, you'll often find that many people are actually at quite an early stage in data maturity. So when you translate this onto all of the things that you might do with data and how you might then choose to leverage data across your wider organization, both within it and outside of it, in terms of how it might in fact impact students and people that engage with your organization, it can have a real impact if you don't have that maturity sitting there. So we sort of step across to how do we talk about talks around this. There's a lot of content we can share around this area, but we always distill it back down to some core pillars in terms of where you would start that exploration. So understanding your data is critical, and that's your data sources and your source systems, how you store and process and manage that data, the volumes that you've got, the quality of it. And Ian will come on later to some of the important aspects of how you govern and control access to that data. And then the technology landscape is complicated. Cornelia showed a slide of technology, which is probably a really simplified view of what you've actually got to go and choose from the Microsoft ecosystem, because there's a whole breadth of different platforms, tooling, services that you can lean on and leverage. So understanding both where you are and where you want to get to is vitally important, and how that technology maps onto what we would call a modern data platform, and what a modern data platform might look like within your organization is also important. And that isn't the same for every organization. That will be driven by the things to the right hand side of this slide. And then John mentioned bringing people on the journey. Stakeholders around the project are important, but there's also the people that are going to consume and use the platforms that you put in. So giving them a voice in the early part of an engagement is really important to get the shape of the program meeting the demands of the wider organization. And then you can also identify the skills and personas out there. So where can you leverage skills and capability that you have in your organization today? How can you get people leaning in and driving your platforms forward in the way you want to at pace? And all this culminates in trying to get to the things we're all interested in, return on investment, driving use cases and delivering outcomes. And it's all amounts to getting value from both your investments and technology. and not just as a one-off deliver a piece of work, get an outcome, but putting in a platform and a strategic way of working that continues to deliver benefit on an ongoing basis as you expand out beyond it. When we look at some of the early stage engagement with John and the team at the Uni of Surrey, this strategy translates into some key areas and some key themes that we will often see when you start unpicking some of what's going on behind the use of data within an organization. So we ran workshops, we did quite focused 2-hour discovery sessions with different pillars across the organization, and canvassing more widely is really important because it gives you different perspectives on where value from data comes from across an organization. And you'll see those common themes that we talked about that John mentioned: disparate data and silos of data, processes that perhaps aren't joined up. The tech should inform itself. So we don't generally talk about technology per se when we're doing discovery. It's about understanding the needs and how you want to work with data. Tools like Excel, the staple of people that work with data, pop up an awful lot, and they're not necessarily a bad thing, but how that then translates into how you present data into the business. Do you have a data lake, a data warehouse? Do you have legacy technology sitting on tins somewhere? Understanding where you are is really important to work out both the value you're getting today from the tech you have invested in, and also where it doesn't work for you, because it informs where you might move to. And we sort of discovered that Fabric felt like a really close fit in terms of what would support the next stage of development for Surrey. And the people is the most important part of engagement, and often the one pillar of strategy that's overlooked. So many organizations will set about delivering strategic technology solutions without engaging a wider business. Then people feel like they're being done to rather than contributing to and being taken on a journey. And these pillars come together to inform your requirements. So the use cases, I think 30 plus use cases were identified in those 4 workshop phases alone. And they broke down into areas of development around the data and the hygiene and the quality and the control of that data, but also translated into AI use cases, which would deliver value for the organization. So this gets turned into a roadmap of deliverables that you then start to work through. And if we flick on a stage, you then start to think about some of the AI crossover piece. And this sort of slide builds into how we engage AI. But I think, John, it's probably worth perhaps just pulling you in quickly to talk about where you've started your co-pilot journey. So I think you're somewhere to the left of here at the moment, just beginning, from what I understand.
Yeah, that's right. We've been very fortunate that Microsoft have provided Copilot Chat for us, which is, merging into other products now, which is great. I think that the challenge for me and my IT team is to catch up with that and actually put a service wrapper around it. So provide more support and guidance for our staff and students around the use of Copilot Chat, where it is, how to use it. And I really want to try and get ahead of that, really, so be a bit more proactive around what's coming down the road, really. So really turn it into a proper service like we would through our service centre in terms of supporting the other parts of IT. And then the other thing we've done in parallel with this is really try to address the challenge around equitable access to ChatGPT type tools, large language models, etc. So we know students are using these facilities, and some can afford to buy their own licenses, others can't. So I was given very much an objective by our Vice-Chancellor that he wanted to provide equitable access to all of our staff and students. And that led us down the road to look at Nebula One from Cloudforce, which obviously runs in our Azure tenant. So we cover off some of the concerns I have around data leakage coming out of the organisation through staff using, for example, free chatbot type services and the inevitable meeting assistants we see popping up in Teams calls, etc. So we're just in the process now of rolling out Nebula One. We're calling it My AI Surrey, where we can provide those large language models type agents to all staff and students. So we're taking very much a sort of 2 parallel stream approach, making sure we're supporting and promoting Copilot Chat, as well as launching our My AI Surrey platform. And we will then also, with the work we're doing with yourselves, look at full Copilot potential use cases as well, which we'll probably do more on a use case basis, so that we can look to leverage the potential advantage from the full Copilot facility as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting, John, and it's a different perspective to what we would see in some of our commercial areas we work in, where you're looking at both the quality and efficacy of that tooling as well across the cohort of students who will be using those tools. So it does bring a different dynamic to it from that perspective. I think, Cornelia, you've probably got a view on how you start to move right across this screen as the demand and the use cases get more complicated. The technology needs to obviously expand to allow you to do those more complicated things.
Absolutely, yeah. What we are actually looking at the moment across the board is an increasing usage of Copilot Chat to cover for most of the workloads that are needed by students and also by researchers and lecturers. Sometimes we see that institutions tend to use MC65 Copilot Full for their staff. Some have all staff scenarios, others have parts of their staff already equipped, because it's just, especially for those that have started later on in the process, to be really honest, it's an easy way to get going on with AI and to kick it off in the organization and then build on that with Copilot Studio and Azure AI Foundry. So the development also from a company point of view goes towards Copilot at the moment very strongly, because institutions realize that off-the-shelf solutions ease their lives quite a bit. And we are also, as a company, trying to enrich the solution as much as possible, because, yeah, that's obviously in everybody's interest. It's still a streamlined enterprise solution. It's not a dedicated academic solution. So we will still need all the other parts as well. Nebula One was mentioned, that's for sure. For the specific workloads also, we need other solutions probably. But we see the trend towards Copilot because it just makes life so much easier for everyone. And talking about the features and the challenge to keep up with the speed, the development, and the skilling, that's something that we are facing as a company ourselves, so internally. But it's definitely a good way right now. If you kick it off now, you will have the structures to have a continuous skilling initiative around all the AI initiatives that you're driving. And that definitely makes sense, and it's the only sustainable way for the future to drive those projects. So many academic institutions, the introduction or deployment of Copilot solutions kicks off the skilling process along with it. And I think that's quite a healthy process, actually.
Yeah, look, it makes sense. I think there's that whole, you blink as the train goes past and you look down the track as it's disappearing into the distance and people feel like they're chasing it to try and catch up with it. I think AI has that impact in terms of how organizations perceive it. And I think when you're getting your arms wrapped around your data strategy, get your data discipline right is one thing. And then you sort of switch on to a slide like this where we talk about our AI factory engagements, where you're getting to the right hand side of doing lots of complex things. You don't necessarily have to have a large program of work. So we talk about the left-hand component one here of let's do some envisioning, let's identify where solutions can add value. Let's maybe do some rapid prototyping to determine where you might get some value from tooling. And these are things you do in parallel to strategy to show value from tools at an early stage. And then Ian will touch on some of this following me in a moment, but you start getting into well-architected frameworks and the governance architecture that sits around it to do these things in the right way. And then we have a process when you get to that third component, which says, look, we're going to drive small proof of concepts that deliver outcomes and add value. And that could be a mixture of something sitting inside Copilot Studio, or it could be a bespoke build that you're building out in Foundry. It doesn't really matter. The ecosystem is there to enable businesses to evolve quickly while driving strategy in parallel. So our call to action would be, don't be scared, have a go, do it in the right way, but play with the tech and learn what it can do for you. I think the wrap for this is quite important, Ian. I think I'll stop talking there because I think we start to get into a little bit of how we govern and control how we do these things next, which is becoming more and more important as we move forwards.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Alistair. So I always like to start with the idea of, okay, well, why? We all kind of hear about everyone saying how you should and what you should do, but if we try and distill down why we want to look at governing the data, if we start on the left with, okay, well, a nice easy one that everyone will probably have to meet is to meet regulatory requirements, whether that's things like UK GDPR, being able to respond to those kind of DSAR or Asia requests, or even if it's just to align yourself to sector guidance like JSC's guidance, meeting those kind of is a non-negotiable. To do that, we've already heard about kind of unifying those multiple data platforms. So that's where we need to be able to go and do those to find that data. So, institutions manage massive volumes of data, both normal and sensitive, from student records, research data, intellectual property. And as we've heard, many of those can operate in distributed and federated models. So your data scattered across faculties, legacy systems, cloud platforms. So bringing all of those together so you can get that single pane of glass to be actually start looking at those, knowing you meet those regulatory requirements is your first port of call. And once you've got those data sources connected, then it's understanding, well, is that data correct? So we've already talked about data quality earlier, but understanding that level of where you might have data that isn't necessarily up to what you need. It's that kind of adage of, good quality data in, good results out. And again, if we can unify that platform and start looking at those data quality, then it really then moves into the next one, the right, which is providing a structure and a clarity for all of your initiatives. So obviously we're here talking about kind of data platforms and AI readiness. This is kind of quite a foundational piece for that, but it can also support you in so many other areas. So making sure that we have those building blocks to support your infrastructure. I always like to kind of think of it like without that platform and without that structure, innovation can be risky. But if you have that structure, then innovation becomes scalable and trusted and compliant. So, John, do you see these kind of governance reasons reflected in Surrey's own data journey, or are there any kind of specific ones that you would have come across I haven't mentioned?
No, definitely. I mean, they very much align, I think, with where we are. I think the challenge within the university, I always found university is quite an interesting organisation. From the outside, it looks like one single entity. Internally, to me, it feels like 15 different companies, all with different agendas and priorities, fighting against each other, all owning their own systems and wanting to keep the data to themselves. And obviously, we need to try and put some governance over the top of that. But also, I think the challenge is to have governance there, which also gives those data owners the confidence that they will release that data. So my interesting discussions have always been with the finance director and the HR director to say, I'd really like copies of your data so I can put it in a lake and we can really look at some interesting stuff about what's going on operationally within the organisation. Trying to get them to unlock that door can be a real challenge, I've found. And sometimes that is around making sure there is good governance in place so that they're assured that even if I've got a copy of their data, I'm not then just going to sort of publish it on the internet, So I think it's about ensuring that the data, when you're moving it around the organisation and trying to use it for different things, is covered by governance to give confidence to those people. So I think that's an area that's important not to forget. I think the other area where I think we probably need more governance is around some standards around data quality, because I think this is another area that certainly the universities I've worked at have struggled with, and we've had to do proactive work to improve. And often it's down to issues, I think, within system controls, but also user training and awareness. And I think sometimes I've tried to improve data quality and it's ended up being an exercise in providing tools to help the owners of that data fix their data. What I've always tried to do is say we need to be looking at the causes of those data errors. So use these tools to fix your data, but actually we need to then try and stand behind that and say what's actually causing these data, and that's where you identify then those system validation rules that are probably missing, or people. I even had one experience in one university where one whole department was using a student record system that had been retired 2 cycles previously. So they were actually putting data into completely the wrong system, which still had a legacy integration. So the data was still flowing through, but causing data errors. But it needs, I think, actual effort to, move the organisation beyond just fixing the data that's in front of them to actually fix the causes of that data.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think, if we look at from a governance point of view, I very much align with that kind of data strategy. And I think we look to drive that from those pillars that Alistair talked about. So if we look at, the people, so aligning those people and roles, which is, it empowers people to be their kind of masters of their own information, to see the value, and they're going to be ultimately best placed to understand, how that data is being gathered or how it's being used. We then look at things like the classification. So if the people understand the data best, then they can also probably be one of the best people to classify that information, to understand where it should and shouldn't be used, and kind of the priority of that information. And if we've got those people that then understand the data and they've classified it, actually then we can move to that data health and quality. So they can feel empowered to make sure that that data is as they see it, and also, to your point, then that becomes a let's not fix it kind of as when it's a problem, let's get ahead of that. So yeah, I really kind of align with that. And if we move away from the data side, so talking kind of AI governance, it's quite a wide, broad subject. I always like to try and distill it down into 2 main questions. So where is data being used, or where is AI being used, and is it being used fairly and accountably? So if we can distill that down, that kind of covers the 2 spheres of AI that I see in terms of consumption and generation. They are 2 kind of different ways in which we will discuss AI. So consumption is, am I using AI, versus generation is, am I building AI? And they both have different pressures, but I think these 2 questions, if you can answer them for both, then it really helps direct your strategy and helps really align with what you're looking for. So, for consumption, ChatGPT in classroom, Copilot, predictive analytics, research automations. Again, you can just take those 2 questions, understand the outcomes there, and that really helps tie your governance piece into your AI strategy. We know that AI brings kind of challenges, and if we get to that generation part, you start then having to think about, okay, who owns the training data? How do we ensure that fairness, accountability of everything that is generated, and the bias? So, and when everything can be very kind of confusing and a lot of different questions, if you can, I always like to kind of distill it down to 2 if we can. So when thinking about, John, think about kind of Surrey's AI strategy, would you say that these 2 questions kind of align, and where do you see your kind of priorities when it comes to AI governance?
Yeah, very much so. And I think Surrey has been a little bit behind the curve in adopting AI formally. So we know lots of people are using it, but maybe not in a particularly safe way. And if I think back probably a year ago, I would have been far more cautious and nervous about what we were planning to try to do with AI, to the extent I'd want to put a lot of control and measures around it. I think we've learned a lot. It's all changed so quickly, and I think we've learned a lot more now about what the strengths, weaknesses, the risk areas around AI. But also, I think as things have moved on, we've got a better understanding of the Copilot setup, for example, and where the data resides there, and also looking at platforms like Nebula One, where we can bring back a bit more of the control, but still give the potential for experimentation, which is really important in the university environment. It's not a completely corporate environment where we want to use AI to analyze our data or put automation in place. We also want to be able to experiment and give students the ability to experiment, but in a safe environment. So I think looking at these 2 areas is really important, and certainly the priorities. And then I think within the university, we do get some other areas which are an interesting debate. especially for our academic colleagues, around should students even be allowed to use AI. And I think, again, this is that maturing piece. I'm sort of been around the block long enough. I remember when things like the internet became far more accessible, and we had things like Google and similar discussions at that time. Should students be allowed to use Google to search for answers to the things that the academics have set them? And I think that's challenging some academic discussion around how we do assessments. How do you assess students now who do have access to AI? But again, we need to be able to do this in a way that we can govern that, still deliver good quality teaching, but also make sure that the students are both, using their own intellect to challenge what's being put in front of them, but also learn the skills that they need to use AI, which will definitely be available to them in the modern workplace. So I think a lot of those challenges are trying to come together, and I think we've probably got a bit of benefit where we are today in having seen what's happened over the past 12 months or so in how this whole space has developed.
Yeah, and I'd really take your point about kind of the guardrails piece. So, yeah, I mean, my specialty for the most part is kind of Microsoft Purview, and what I do a lot with that is help kind of people stand up those guardrails. So, if you start with the kind of the insights on the left, so understanding where that's being used, so that kind of comes off the back of that. If you've done a bit of piece on the discovery of data, then you can understand where that kind of data is then being used in AI. You can have, data loss, things like data loss prevention and simulation to understand where it's being used. And there's DSPM for AI, which is all just gathering that information to make your better informed decisions. And then to your point, that middle piece, so we just create a safe path, right? So we allow people to kind of make their own journey and come up with those innovations and the use cases, but we just ensure those guardrails are in place, so we actually understand, if there is something that shouldn't be being done, or and it's not to kind of be a blocker to anyone. It's really an educational piece in the first instance, so it's really just to help nudge people to that correct behavior. And then the final part that we always look to do is locating that data on its journey. So we talked about users and that kind of journey, but then we're looking at, okay, well, do we understand where that data has flown? So we talked about it being healthy in the first place, but where's the journey of that information? So yeah, we can certainly, I think, putting all those three together helps get you on that journey nice and safe. So also just to note, I know we said it earlier, it doesn't all have to be done all before you start. To your point, we can essentially make sure that we have the guardrails in place. Innovation can happen just with that safe path. Josh.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ian. So as Beth mentioned in the chat, if you do have any questions whilst we've got John and Cornelia and Alistair with us, and please do post them in the chat. We'll be coming back to the guys in a second as well. Just in terms of next steps from our perspective, so the content will be shared with you. We'll share the recording, we'll share the slides, I'll share a transcript as well, so you've got that all in one place. And obviously feel free to fire any questions afterwards as well. Effectively, next steps are really broken into wanting to understand Microsoft funding for universities, so we can explore that eligibility for you in terms of what would be available across all the data, AI and governance pillars. In terms of AI readiness, so we run a workshop focus on Gen AI ops maturity, but also an assessment around AI readiness around the Copilot piece and agents that we spoke about earlier today. And then also when it comes to obviously this data, AI and governance strategy, as we have been working on that strategy with Surrey, we'll be pleased to kind of support you as well. So happy to discuss that in a workshop. So really, John, just starting with you, I'd like to just really summarize any kind of practical lessons that you've walked through today. What would be a key kind of takeaway from your perspective for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things, Josh. I mean, certainly getting board level support is really important, I think, as CIOs in terms of taking this forward. And we're working together at the moment to look at running a board level workshop to actually talk about AI. How do we align that with our strategic objectives and our university strategy, but also to try and identify some goals and objectives and use cases. One thing that's of interest to us is, could we be using AI more in terms of our international student recruitment, for example? So I think trying to work through some of those things is really important. I think one thing for me is, as CIO, try not to own the whole of AI. It's much more than one thing. What I've just done recently is I've got agreement from 3 board level members to own AI strategically for their areas. So the PVC for education, the PVC for research, and the chief operating officer for operational efficiency, really. So the pressure moves slightly away from me. I'm here to develop the tools, maybe the governance and the support, but those guys can then really lead on how are we going to use AI in the teaching arena, if you like, and sort of drive that forward. So I think that's really important. I think very much like cybersecurity, staff awareness and training is really important, and we're really trying to put a focus around that, giving them the confidence, but also be aware of the pitfalls, the ethical issues, the biases, the hallucinations, all those type of things that we're aware of, making sure everyone's aware of that. And I think the other advice I would say is I've tried to take small steps, with both Copilot and Nebula One. Haven't tried to boil the whole ocean in one go. Working with yourselves again on the data side to try and do some of that focus workshops to start to build up some proof of value opportunities, so that we can start to build a lake house. We can start to get our data AI ready, start to roll out AI use cases. So I've been trying to convince the board that we do need to walk before we can run. And I think the final thing I would say is it definitely helps to have engage a good partner like Transparency, because I think we gain a lot from the experience you've got from other sectors, plus your relationships with Microsoft. And I've found that extremely useful with the workshops we've done, and really trying to pull that focus together, which we would have really struggled to be able to achieve internally, both in terms of the capability and capacity at the moment that I have within my teams. So those are really some things I think over a number of iterations of these types of projects I've learned help me to get things moving forward, I think.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, John. So just to keep with the theme as well of the piece that you mentioned earlier, universities are quite unique, not necessarily the same as all of the commercial sector. Amy has asked a question in terms of how are we keeping up with the speed of requests at Surrey. So they're in the planning and discovery stage. People around the business are kind of making requests and moving without IT, which I know is a challenge that you've had to go through. How would you tackle that one?
I think there's two things there, really. We didn't at Surrey have a sort of prioritisation process. And my previous universities, I've helped to set this up, and we've now created that. So we've created a centralised programme management office, and we're now trying to push more of these requests through that process. Before, it tended to hit us left, right and centre in IT, and everything was very important. Everything was related to the National Student Survey. So as or the Vice Chancellor had said this is priority. Doing this, we've got more of a objective assessment based on a number of criteria, which can then give us an overall ranking of all the projects and requests that come through, and then we can start working on the most important ones, and that's agreed by the executive board. I think the other element is the work I've been doing around the digital plan and explaining to the board that we cannot physically do everything, and we need to be able to prioritise and make sure that we invest in the foundational stuff like a data strategy, so that we get our data correct to start with. And that's a difficult ask, because everybody wants the shiny stuff. But I think if you can show that there are implications by not doing this, and I think some of the experiences over the last few years at Surrey help to give that example of where some projects have gone wrong because the underlying foundations and the basics haven't been done properly. I think the final thing is where possible, not try to invent new governance. So a lot of the things we already have in place around IT system requests, for example, where someone wants to go out and buy some new IT, you can apply to a certain extent to new AI requests as well. And again, making sure people are following that, the GDPR is covered off, the person impact assessments and those sort of things. all helps to, I think, reduce the risk of us trying to oversee absolutely everything going on. Because I think there will be an element, as we know, that AI is just happening anyway. I think it's trying to bring a level of control and almost self-governance, I think, and responsibility down to those individuals that are trying to take something forward in the organisation. But I very much recognise I haven't fixed it, and I don't think I've ever fixed it. But I think there's certain things you can do to try and reduce the pain a little bit, really.
Brilliant. Just on cue, Cornelia, I was just going to ask you as well for your key takeaway. So if you wanted to chip on that, feel free.
Yeah, that was just so inviting. So I think what you really did well, and what is not an easy step to take, is getting the trust of the organization for what you're doing. So absolutely involving the board is essential. Of course, you need that backup, you need that support from their side, and also the budgets, of course. But I think also internally, you will be trusted only if you deliver on what's of their interest. So if you think of researchers, for example, they want easy to get and quick solutions for their research. They don't want to wait. They don't want to apply for it in long-term processes. And if you are able to deliver on that level, research is just one example. You can also transfer that to any professional services. And if you really get it right, and also from the compliance point of view, people feel safe in what you're providing and what they are doing on the tools. This is something super crucial. And so I would never underestimate the compliance part of things, because that's usually the kind of the entrance to getting the trust of the whole of the organization, because somebody is taking care of that, super annoying and hard to get bit, to ensure that all your projects are running on compliant IT and safely in a safe environment. If you provide that, and if you're quick, and if it's a success, then you get internal trust, and then the project drives themselves. And this is something fundamental, I think. So absolutely key to get that once, the buy-in of the organization, kind of.
Perfect. Any kind of closing thoughts from your perspective, Alistair, in terms of key takeaways?
No, I think a lot of it's been said. I think aim for some early wins and some early value, demonstrate capability, and take people on the journey with you. Do it with the right guardrails, and you won't go far wrong. And that summarizes it up into one sentence for a complex strategic deliverable. But John's having a fair crack at it, and I think if you follow some of that guidance, you won't go too far wrong.
Awesome. Well, we just want to thank you all for joining today during your lunch hour, I'm sure. Special thanks to John for doing this. You obviously you didn't have to do this. So we really appreciate you spending your time with us and sharing the insights from Surrey and your previous roles. Cornelia as well. I know you're busy, so thank you so much. And of course to Alistair and Ian as well. I will be sharing around the content shortly. You'll have that by tomorrow in terms of the recording and the slides and the transcripts. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to shoot them across. Happy to connect you with the team as well. And yeah, just thank you again. Have a good day.